Well, Michigan State University is on the cusp of making history with construction of the university's first freestanding multicultural center set to begin this spring. In February of 2023, the Board of Trustees gave the university the green light to break ground this spring on the $38 million, 34,000 square foot facility on the corner of North Shaw and Farm Lane. And it's great to have four people very involved in this project coming to fruition to talk about that today. We have Vennie Gore joining us, who's the Senior Vice President for Student Life and Engagement at Michigan State University. Lee June is a professor in the Honors College and the Department of Psychology. Maggie Chen-Hernandez was the director of MOSAIC, the Multicultural Unity Center, for quite a while. She's recently retired. And Sharron Reed-Davis is an MSU recently graduated student, too, who played a major role in seeing this come to fruition. So welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Vennie, why don't we start with you? Sort of what did the board approve exactly? What are some of the next steps, and sort of describe when you came into the project and how you helped carry it over the goal line?
Sure. So today is a momentous day. The board approved authorization to proceed, and what that means is that we're able to execute a construction contract with our construction partners, which will allow us then to put a shovel in the ground and start building this building. And this has been a labor of love. Sharron, who is with us, was one of the student leaders that met with President Stanley in the fall of 2019 that sort of kicked this off. And our first step was to do a feasibility study. Two of my colleagues, Paulette Granberry-Russell and Denise Mainbank, and myself were the three executives that were co-chairing or tri-chairing the feasibility study. And as we started down this process, what was really important for us is that this was student-led with student voice. And there were about 120 different meetings and interviews that we had with the community over that, because we wanted to ensure that this was a student facility. So we hired a group out of Detroit, Hamilton Anderson. They are an architect firm, and so they led the feasibility study. And from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we had multiple different opportunities, whether it be small focus groups, community meetings, or surveys to understand what our students wanted and sort of build this from the ground up. And later on in the fall of 21, we had authorization to plan. And that gave us the ability to hire another group of architects, the Smith Group, also out of Detroit, who came in to help us, in Clark White, who is our construction management group. And one of the really good things that the Smith Group brought for us is not only their practice out of Detroit, but their practice out of Washington, D.C. And the two lead architects worked with a number of cultural buildings, including the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., wow, and then some other facilities in Virginia. So we were totally ecstatic about them. And one of the things was that was important for us when we chose our architect was, were they good listeners? And they were extremely good listeners in working with students. And so we've been really happy. And I think what we'll see in this building is, architecturally, it's a beautiful building. But in the inside is really where the magic happens. And one of the things our students says, they want to have a living room where they can go and relax and hang out and be with their friends in between class in the evening. And then we also have offices for our Cores and Cops group. And then upstairs, there are a number of different conference rooms that will allow for student groups to get together to meet. And the other important thing, which I think Dr. June will really appreciate, is that this is just not only a place for our students to come, it's a place for education. Right. And so there are 3 small classrooms that could be made into large classrooms. This gives us an opportunity to bring cultural and faculty together to talk about the various different historical issues that are facing students or just learning opportunities. So we really are excited about this building and the future for what it has.
Let's bring in Dr. Lee June, who was there at the very beginning when the idea of a multicultural center at MSU came up, and give us your perspective on this center coming to fruition. Give us a little bit of the background, how you're feeling today.
I'm feeling great. It goes way, way back, actually. This has been a consistent concerns of students. But in terms of an actual multicultural center, I remember 1997, thereabouts, that President McPherson and the board finally agreed that we would have a multicultural center. And I remember negotiating or talking to the students, and they really debated strongly. We want a freestanding. What happened then was they showed the students two options: Will's house on campus and the basement of the Union. And the students finally agreed that they would do the basement of the Union. But it was made clear even then that even though they would accept this, they were not satisfied. And so in 1999, the first center was open. And I know Maggie can probably remember some of the students' names. So 1997, 99, and then you fast forward to what, 2024? So what, about 25 years in coming. So even with the facility in the basement, they kept pushing. Then they moved to the MOSAIC. And then what I remember is that while a lot of students, even from 1999, kept pushing it, then Miss Sharron and Miracle, I'm going to have to mention her name, really were the two group student leaders who really relentlessly kept pushing the university for a freestanding multicultural center. And I give her a lot of credit. And maybe, Maggie, you want to talk a little history about what you remember in 1999 and who some of the students were and how you were feeling then?
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Yeah, it's been a long time. Wow. Once this building is built, it will have been 25 years. Super exciting. I think back then it really was, I really attribute the multicultural center space that was in the basement to have actually happened because of the CORE's leaders, the
Correct.
Coalition of Racial Ethnic Students, which is composed of the different student leaders from El Paso, the Asia Pacific American Student Organization, Black Student Alliance, BSA, CREW, which was the Latinx student group, as well as NASO, the Native Indigenous student groups. That coalition of student leaders and various names, and oh gosh, that's going to be hard because they all blend together, but they consistently met. I remember very clearly before 1999 happened, and they were meeting, and they were so dedicated that these student leaders would meet at 8 a.m. on a Friday morning. On Friday mornings, that shows you the kind of dedication, because they all had classes at different times of the days of the week. And to meet on a Friday morning at 8 a.m. To talk and to consistently make progress, they understood that they needed to meet with various administrators. And I think, it was due to their dedication and advocacy that the first space happened. And then along the way, I don't think it ever, it never escaped different core leaders' minds about having a freestanding multicultural center.
Correct. That was critical.
Yeah.
Well, Sharron, let's bring you in now and give us a little bit of that student perspective. Why was this so important to you? How are you feeling today? What do you hope the building does for our community?
I have high hopes for the multicultural building, and from the student's perspective, when I was a student, I don't know, first of all, Miracle is the one that brought me into BSA. She acclimated me to campus.
Miracle
a lot
Chapman.
of people
Miracle
don't know
Chapman.
that. Yeah, Miracle Chapman acclimated me to campus, brought me into BSA, and she's the reason that I applied for the board, became president, and everything else. So definitely, Miracle is one of the big people. She should probably be here talking about some of it, because aside from the student activism from Course, Miracle, Tammy, and Sarah McConville, all created a org called Students for a Multicultural Building in 2019. So we collaborated
freestanding.
Freestanding multicultural building. And we got this language because maybe 2018 or early 2019 could have been, I was in the MOSAIC Center actually and just looking through documents because I felt like our history was getting lost. So community was a big thing for BSA, but for me, like, I'm big on activism and advocacy. So I wanted to see like what we were fighting for before. And I found some of those documents that specifically said freestanding multicultural building. So I'm like, all right, they've been asking for that. That's something that we need. So when we created like our list of demands, and presents them with President Stanley, we didn't just have cores and cops. We had students from Wayne State, students from Eastern Michigan. We had NAACP on board and students for a freestanding multicultural building, all on board. So it was a collaborative effort from different campus partners and some even out of campus, because they realized what a multicultural center, a freestanding building, could say for the like campus community. And that was the most important thing. And like that dedication and commitment is what I think made it so successful, because we all like sacrificed a lot to even do it. I remember the day before, which was 2 days before the Black Power rally. Some people don't remember, like we were like, oh, should we do this? Like, should we really do this? Because it's also finals, about to be finals around that time. We're planning this big show, and then we're planning a sit-in in the president's office. Like, nonetheless, like, that's a big deal. And we were tired and just over it, to be honest. And we were thinking about canceling, but then we got so much feedback and input from the community, and all of our communities, not just the Black community. We got so much input and feedback. We're like, okay, the campus needs this. Like, people are willing to show up and show out for this. So this is something that we're responsible for doing. And it just wasn't us. We are standing on the backs of all of the people who came before us, all of the people who fought for this. So if we're gonna like go and move forward with all this stuff, we have to do it to the best of our ability. And the freestanding multicultural building was only one of 10 demands, but that was the biggest one. That was the largest one, and the one that we have been fighting for the longest. So I was very surprised and excited when this was something that the administration was on board with. And I personally had a deep mistrust of administration. Like, Paulette and Vennie and Dr. Royal and all these administrators are the ones that like changed my mind a little bit. And I commend President Stanley, even though personally, like, I had my reservations about him, but he was completely on board as well. Like, okay, how do we get this done? And he was willing to meet with us monthly, and Vennie was willing to meet with us monthly, like, to get these things done. And that's what made it possible. So it wasn't just the students. Like, we did have the biggest voice or the loudest voice in it, but it couldn't happen like without the backing of the staff, the faculty, and the administration, and the alumni that want to all see this happen. So I'm very excited.
I can tell. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, so Sharron, why is it a facility like this important to MSU students?
Just because every year something is happening on campus. Some racial, some bias event is happening. And this is not just MSU's campus. It's across the world. That's why these spaces are important for, like what we talked about, education as well as belonging. It's giving students who are the minority on campus somewhere that they feel like is home. That's why the living room space was so important. That's why comfortability is so important, because we need a place where we feel comfortable, a place where we belong. For me, my time on campus, that was the BSA room. I'm like, okay, this is our space, you know? So we need a space like that for all of us. And it shouldn't be our various course rooms that are across campus and the one cop's suite that's supposed to fit 9 organizations. Like, that shouldn't be it. It should be a building for all of us. And even the groups that courts and cops don't represent should be able to come into this building and feel at home. Like this is a place. And even the majority students should come in this building and feel like, okay, this can be my home too. And this is a place where I can learn something. Even if I never seen a Black person before in my life, I can come here and feel welcomed and comfortable enough to ask, okay, so what is the Black community about? Like that's something that we need, because the world is full of ignorance and hate, and we need a place where we can come and let that stay out of the door and educate and bring people in and not push people away. So
well said, Sharron.
And as you know, Vice President Gore and Ms. Chen-Hernandez know, in academic terms, there's a lot of research that shows that belongingness and having spaces like that contribute to students' well-being, also contribute to graduation, retention rates, and all of those. And early in the game, actually, the students did that kind of research and even presented to the institution. So you've authored that, I'm sure.
Yes.
The sense of belonging.
Yes. So I think one of the things that we see is the freshman, sophomore year are critical. And students don't leave Michigan State because of academic reasons or financial reasons. They leave Michigan State because they don't feel like they belong. They haven't found their place. And so this space is really critical to helping students to find their space. Because once a student feels like they belong, then they can do what Sharron did, which is to get involved in the student communities, groups, organizations, become leaders, and they get those high impact experiences. And so that's what we are looking forward to in this space. I think there's one other thing that I'd like to think about. So Janine and myself have talked about what we call a faculty in residence. And what we'd like to do is have a program where we invite a faculty to spend a year and for discussion around various different topics, whatever that faculty member's expertise may be. And because I think that's the other part that's important for us. I think also, too, this building for social perspectives. So for alumni and faculty and staff, that I think that the backside of it, the amphitheater, is critically important for all kinds of different social activities. So there's a space here, I think, for all types of learning and opportunities to connect and become part of the Michigan State experience. I know Dr. June has some thoughts too.
No, I was just going to say, Sharron has mentioned that, but we need to give credit again to President Stanley. I mean, we've had many presidents, but in my experience, he was the first one that totally embraced the idea of a freestanding multicultural center. And then Provost, well, she was Provost Woodruff, got on board. Vennie was always on board. So we want to really commend him for bringing this to fruition. And Maggie, I'm just curious whether or not there are some other names that you might want to commend as you think about this coming to fruition in a year or so. Oh, there are two other names, I guess. Historically, Bill Latter and Jim Shepard. Jim Shepard was in the MSU Union, and he was the director of the union. And and then Bill Latter really helped us a lot. But any other names historically you want to shout out?
I think that there's lots of folks. There's a lot of faculty, individuals who helped, really supported and was continuing to, advocate. Other administrators, you yourself was, you were so critical, Dr. June. I think Barb Krantz.
Yes.
She's from budget and planning. So when we moved up to the second floor, she was really critical to get the support. There's a lot of folks, in the
Phyllis Grumman, who helped with an evaluation. There are a lot of people.
Phyllis was great.
Right. And I want to say one other thing, if you don't mind, about student demands.
Please.
People like Gore administration, they don't like students to make demands. And here's what I want to say. Dr. King said rights were the language of the unheard. And in many ways, I see demands as the language of students, and they feel they are unheard. And really, I'd like you to respond to this, Sharron, but in my experience over the almost 50 years now, students make demands not because they hate the university, they love the university, and they look at the university and say, we want it to be better. We want it to represent all of us, and so they make demands because they want to see the university become better. And I hope as we go forward and students continue to make demands, administrators will listen to them and see them as the voices of individuals who love the institution, not hate it, but want to see it better. Do you agree with that analysis?
Yes, I agree. And it's not like students want to leave the university because they don't have a sense of belonging.
Right.
They don't know where to start. Like, this is such a big university that some students just fall through the cracks, and we don't see them because you only see the people who have the loudest voice most of the time, or the people who is actually showing up. Some students don't know how to do that. Some students don't have experience. So if there aren't upperclassmen or faculty and staff reaching out to those students trying to bring them in, they're not finding that sense of belonging, especially if you don't do like a summer program like Magic or SBI or something like that. You're not finding that sense of belonging until you get to campus, in which you're now overwhelmed with classes and how big the university is. Like, students don't want to leave. That's why we make these demands, so that we can keep our communities here. We don't want to fall through the cracks. We want to be here. And I know, like, admin does not like the word demands. People used to tell me all the time, like, when Dr. Maybank was here, like, Dr. Maybank does not like the word demands.
Yeah, right.
And I just used to laugh because I'm like, okay, what other word should we use? But I'm thankful to people like Paulette or Dr. Royal, who will sit with me and be like, okay, you can't say that, but you can say it like this. Or like would help students word things, because sometimes we don't know, like, this is a business, and students, we're one of the stakeholders, but we don't have that business mindset. We're just looking at our way of life and if it's being compromised or if it needs to be better. So having those people in those spaces to be able to be like, okay, this is what I want to say, but I don't know how, and having people be able to help you with that, that's how we come together, instead of like having this wedge between administration and the students, because a lot of students don't know administration. They're not comfortable with them. So having that, I hope that the Multicultural Center will bring that, like having that gap disappear. That shouldn't be there. Or even with faculty and staff, like sometimes faculty and staff aren't reachable. And sometimes students aren't willing to go into those spaces because they're not comfortable there. A lot of students aren't comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we have to teach them how to become that way.
Although we are here celebrating and we're just very happy about the Multicultural Center, I'm going to throw this back to you as a student. This is not the end all, right?
No,
There's
not at
still
all.
some other things that need to be done, and we want to keep that in mind. We're celebrating and we're optimistic, but there are still some things left to do, right?
Yeah, like I said, like our demand, like the freestanding multicultural building was 1 point in a 10-point plan for the university. And students, like, we'll say this, like, this is our 10-point plan for MSU. And we don't have the bandwidth to be able to focus on all of those things at once. This is what we want to happen. This is what we want to see. Now, what can y'all do with it as administration? What can y'all do with this? But students are out of here. They rolling out within 4 to 5 years, sometimes 6, they rolling out. So we need the admin and we need faculty and staff to be able to carry out these wishes, because I told like my e-board all the time when I was on campus, we aren't planning for us. The stuff that we are doing is not for us. It's going to be for the next generation, because we're not going to be here to see it. But just because we're not going to be here to see it doesn't mean that it's something that doesn't need to happen. So
I can see why you were so convincing to President Stanley.
Yeah.
Sharron.
So the one person that we sort of hinted around a little bit is Paulette.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And, Paulette has spent 20 years in her role as special advisor
20
to the
plus,
president.
20 plus.
And she was always really good at taking the extra moment in time to talk to students and faculty and staff on her own time. And there would be times in which I'd get a email from her at 10 o'clock at night, and she's still in her office.
Okay.
And but there are people like that really, are why we're here today. And so I just want to make sure that Paulette
Granberry Russell.
Paulette Granberry Russell, that people really appreciate the work that she did.
Yeah. Maggie, any final thoughts?
Well, I just, I think that there are countless names. There's countless people who, should be recognized and acknowledged. And there are just so many. And I guess for me, I think about it that it took, it's taken a lot of folks collectively together to really bring this vision into, fruition and to make it a reality. So many former student leaders as well as who are now alumni. And so that is, I think, what's really cool about the new center is the fact that a big stakeholder are the alumni. And they're excited to see this, become a reality.
And the lesson we see in this, and Maggie, you mentioned that earlier, it's kind of started out in many ways like Black Students, Black Student Alliance. Then you got the CORES group. Then they formed the coalition. Then you got more momentum, ASMSU, RHA, and all of the other student organizations got involved, and it became a university-wide, campus-wide, and alumni. And all of those come together, and that's how change really happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, as I guess my final thought, like you said, like you see why I was so convincing to President Stanley. I'm actually not even the one that talked to him during the whole thing.
Who was it?
It was Dante Booker and Leslie Hernandez who were actually the ones to speak.
Wow.
So it's so impactful because that's what shows that it was a team effort. Because I know my strengths. My strengths are not negotiation. I know, my strength is.
I think she's lying. that's not the Sharron I know. That's not the Sharron I know. So.
At the moment, my strength was not negotiation, and it took a team effort to even get me to where I am today to be, or to, I guess, be the student leader that I was on campus. Like, it took a team to get me there because that is not who I stepped on this campus was. That was not who I stepped on this campus as by far. But with the help of administrators, faculty, staff, students, and now alumni, we got to where we were, and I got to where I am because of them. So it wasn't me. I'm not even the result of myself. I'm the result of my village who was behind me and who helped to push me up. So.
And then, one thing, I'm going to say this is Black History Month, and, I was in administration for a long time, and I used to try to prove Frederick Douglass wrong. He said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. And I was trying to say, why can't administration prove him wrong and just do things for students without them making a demand? And unfortunately, he remains correct. Power concedes nothing without a demand.
Well, on that note, let's close our discussion on Michigan State University's soon-to-be and long-sought-for Multicultural Center that's officially a go from the Board of Trustees. And we've been talking about that with Maggie Chen-Hernandez, who joined us on the telephone. She's recently retired and was the director of MOSAIC, the Multicultural Unity Center. Sharron Reed-Davis was our student representative. Sharron, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we had Vennie Gore, Senior Vice President of Student Life and Engagement at Michigan State University, who really pushed this over the goal line for the final touchdown. Vennie, always good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Russ.
And an unsung hero in the whole process.
No doubt. He'd be too humble to say so. And that's Professor Lee June, MSU icon. So great to have him on MSU Today finally. A lot more information simply at mccenter.msu.edu.